Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Preview Pod. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it's time to preview another portion of the Knicks' upcoming season, a part of the roster, a part of the makeup of the team, and decide where it ranks in the NBA today. This has a chance to be a very special NBA season. In case you missed it, we've already gone through whether they have a top 5 starting 5, whether they have a top 5 wing duo in the NBA. And today we're going to look at the bench unit. A lot has been made of the Knicks' depth and whether or not they have some of the best depth in the NBA, whether that would be a strength of theirs this season, which potentially could be one of the best we've seen in the franchise's history. And joining me to have this discussion and break down whether they do have a top 5 bench unit in the NBA, the one and only Mr. Hot Hand Theory himself, XJ. How you doing, buddy? Long time no speak.
GMAC, Andrew Claudio. I am excited to be back talking Knicks. It's late September, so for me that means 3 things. That means my mom's birthday.
Oh.
That means my new wife's birthday.
Hey!
And that means Knicks training camp is around the corner. I am ready to go. I'm excited to talk Knicks.
So I now have to say 2 things. First of all, happy birthday, XJ's mom. I don't even know, need more information. We'll just say happy birthday to your mom. I hope she sees this. Send her this and say that Andrew Claudio, who she doesn't know,
she knows. She knows. Me? Come on, she knows you. You think she's never seen KFS? You think she's never seen the KFS podcast, Andrew?
As far as I'm concerned, nobody watches this, okay? Especially family members. I say stuff all the time, and my wife's like, oh, sure, you did that in the thing, right? Yeah, totally. So shout out XJ's mom, loyal supporter of Knicks Film School, and happy birthday. Speaking of women in your life, congratulations, XJ. I didn't know if you were going to say it or not. Married man, Mr. XJ. Congratulations. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Married life rules, and I hope you're enjoying it.
Thank you. It's going great.
And then let's talk about the Knicks. Obviously, the most important thing on the list. This basketball team, XJ, a lot's been made, a lot's been discussed. A lot of the talking heads are starting to get their conversations out about the team, what they love the most, what they have questions about, whether they're selling Julius Randle's jersey, even though that wasn't real. Everything about this team is being discussed. And what I'm so fascinated by in this conversation is going into the year last year, a lot was made about the depth. And then some consolidation happened and a lot was made about how little depth they had. Shout out to the Detroit Pistons. And now they go back into this year and a lot is being made about their depth. I ask you this. I mean, we'll just start off here. How big of a weapon do you actually think after the couple weeks and doing some research of this, how big of a weapon do you think their depth is going to be going into this year?
I think that in general, depth is hugely important and it's very underrated, especially in the regular season. In the regular season, depth is an absolute weapon. It can allow you to sustain injuries. It can allow your players to get some more rest, something that we'll talk about probably in a little bit. It is hugely important and very underrated. And I often think about, when people talk about consolidation, to me, if you're in a situation where you're looking to consolidate, you're probably in a good situation. You probably don't need to consolidate because depth is always going to be useful. Knock on wood, there are always going to be injuries. And I just think it's critical to have depth going through an 82 game regular season, especially when you're a team who has hopes of maybe achieving what only one team is going to achieve in a given season. So to me, depth is critical, and the Knicks' depth, I think, is an absolute weapon this season. I'm probably going to spoil. I don't know if you had it as a suspenseful thing. I'll start here. I just want to start here at the very top. Everyone knows that I keep it real, probably borderline, keeping it real gone wrong, you might say. I might end up on a Chappelle Show skit for this. But the Knicks don't have a top 5 bench.
Don't have a top 5 bench. Oh no, XJ. Okay.
They easily have a top 3 bench in the entire NBA.
You got me. Well done.
Yeah,
you
I had to do it to you.
Well
easily
done.
a top 3 bench. Easily.
Respect the chess move. Well done. Okay. So have a top 3 bench in the NBA.
an amazing bench. We'll talk in more detail about why I think that. I think it'd be hard to argue otherwise. And I don't think there's an argument that they don't have a top 5 bench. I probably, I would listen to it, but I could not even come up with one hypothetically. So this is going to be a fun conversation.
So going through the research and looking through the league at all the different teams that allegedly have a very good bench unit, I should just say to start out, we're operating with the understanding that the bench unit is Josh Hart, Donte DiVincenzo, Deuce McBride, Precious Achiuwa, and then everybody else, whether it be Campaign, whether it be Tyler Kolek, Marcus Morris's name got added to the list, Landry Shamit's name got added to the list, Pacome Dadier, I'm missing a bunch of guys.
We can miss the rest of them.
But they have NBA guys, it sounds like, that are going to be in their 12th, 13th, 14th men options for this season. And look, you mentioned the weapon that it can be, especially if you want to keep guys healthy, keep guys fresh, especially when people get hurt, how you can manage injuries. You and I have had discussions over the years about load management, and this seems like a team ripe for load management. And whether you want to manage OG Anunoby's minutes or his games played, whether you want to manage Jalen Brunson's minutes or games played. Now, I don't think that's happening in this organization, especially under this head coach, and really just with the culture that they've created with the Villanova collective, where it's not necessarily I want you to manage my minutes, I want you to manage to play me more minutes, seems to be the philosophy. Now, this is a different set of circumstances where not that the regular season doesn't matter, but the playoffs absolutely matter. So I just want to give you the floor. Where do you stand on the concept of load management going into this season, and whether the Knicks should potentially try it or employ it a little bit?
Yeah, I love this conversation, as you know. I think load management gets a bad rap for a few reasons. It's like some of it is it's not having a mentality of competition, or that it really stinks for the fans. And I hear those points. I really do, especially that it sucks for the fans. I really can empathize with that point. But from an organizational standpoint, winning is what gives you the best material success, like financially. And also as a fan personally, that's the thing I care about the most. So if I know my organization is doing everything they can possibly do to increase their chances of winning a championship, even by 2%, even by 3%, I'm happy as a fan. That's what I want to see. I'm a bottom line kind of thinker in that way. And I'll say this part, Andrew, for you, especially part of that is, yes, I'm a lifelong Yankees fan, so, a nice regular season and losing in the ALDS is just a waste of time, and losing in the ALCS, it's a disappointment. Like, I don't really care about that season that much. But that aside, I feel like health is key. Health is key. I would love to do a study on this, but I really believe that health is probably the most highly correlated factor with playoff success if you hold constant like team talent. So basically, the team that's supposed to win will win as long as they're healthy most of the time. So for me, load management is not really about restricting games. It's not about taking games off. It's just about keeping minutes reasonable. And it's about reducing time on the court, reducing wear and tear, which reduces the chances of injury. Can weird random stuff happen that causes injury at any point in time? Yes, absolutely. That can happen. We saw it happen with Julius Randle. It can happen. Anything can happen. Do you reduce those chances if you're on the court less? Yes. Do you reduce wear and tear injuries that occur from overuse if you're on the court less? Yes. So both things can be true. And in my opinion, even if it's not pushing, the likelihood of staying healthy by 50%, I think it is pushing the likelihood of staying healthy by 5%. And that 5% matters a lot to me when you're trying to win a championship.
So I don't think I disagree with you all that much. I think the biggest argument, discussion, whatever you want to call it, debate that we ever had was the Randle injury in the regular season 2 years ago, when you were on playback and after Randle landed on Bam Adebayo's foot and turned his ankle, you were like, load management, guys. I don't know. I think it's important. And just like, are we blaming load management for why Bam Adebayo stuck his dirty ankle underneath Julius Randle? What are you talking about? And that's really the the preventative measure that I think goes a bit too far sometimes, that it's like, well, if we had load managed Julius, Bam's ankle he wouldn't have turned his ankle on Bam's foot. When, yes, you're right that if I'm not on the road, if I'm not driving my car on the road, I'm technically not at risk of getting in a car accident. But if I'm just driving to work and someone rams into me, I'm then not at fault because that person caused the accident. The concept of managing minutes, though, and we actually did see a little bit of it last year. It was a bit mandated by the medical staff, which is why I'm curious about the push and pull of how much will be from Tibbs, how much will be from the players. It seemed, look, the small victory I took was that if Tibbs is given a minutes restriction on a guy, whether it be Isaiah Hartenstein or Jalen Brunson, he'll honor it. And he honored it, I think, pretty masterfully, especially Hartenstein the second half of the year, where he chose when those 30 minutes would be played. Sometimes we saw 12-minute Hartenstein first halves last year, so he could play him the extent of the second half. That Celtics game that everybody got so annoyed about because he played Hartenstein the entire fourth quarter of a blowout, and the Celtics almost came back, at least made it a game. He did that knowing that Hartenstein wasn't going to play the next day. And that's how, you still get your work in, but you don't necessarily overdo it. And that, I think, will be important this season because you have, back to the topic of the bench, you have three guys that I think could be starters on this team, or at least in the NBA. Precious Achiuwa, as much as he started at the 4 last year, is a really good backup center and potentially a depth piece in the regular season. And you look at what they have, it's actually ripe for a team that if you want to manage Anunoby's minutes where he's like strategically missing certain games, well, we've got a Josh Hart or a DiVincenzo to plug right in. Or if you want to, like, the Brunson's the curious one because I don't know how much I trust Deuce as the point guard, but if you wanted to give Tyler Kolek a look, you could. All this to say, they're built to sustain injury, even if they don't load manage this season. And that, I think, is a testament of a deep team. Do you agree? And by the way, if you have any, I just went on for a lot. If you have any retort, by means, go ahead.
I'll start with the end that you just had. I do think they're built to withstand injury, and I think that is necessary. I think, again, like I said, injuries are going to happen whether you load manage or not. You can load manage to the best of your ability. You could play a guy 50 games and 30 minutes a game, and it's still possible that player gets injured. It just is part of the game in any sport, and so you have to be able to withstand injuries if you want to reach the highest heights that you can, especially during the regular season, because you need to reach the playoffs healthy. So, in my opinion, you have to be able to withstand injuries. But I will say, just kind of going back to your point that you were mentioning about the Julius Randle getting injured by stepping on Bam Adebayo's foot.
Well, hold on. You gotta say it correct. The dirty foot.
The dirty foot of Idris Adebayo.
Yes.
So to that point, when I was making that statement, it was more about the fact of, you can't rule out, in my opinion, and people may disagree with it. That's fine. I think this is just true. You can't rule out that fatigue is a factor in injury tolerance and durability. And what I mean by that is, if I look at a guy like LeBron James, LeBron James has historically not gotten injured very often. And we just say, oh, he's just built different. Like, that's just how he is. He's just impenetrable. In my opinion, some of that has to just do with his pure durability in terms of his ability to stay at a high level without being fatigued, his cardio, his physical conditioning. When you're kind of at your peak, and I'll just say this one quick example and let you rebut if you want, and then we could just move forward. But in my opinion, like, if you've ever played a sport or something like that, let's say you're playing basketball, just pick up basketball. When you're kind of fresh and you come down on your ankle, you come down on someone's foot, oftentimes you can kind of bounce back. You kind of like catch yourself. You don't fall with the full pressure, the full brunt of the force of the fall comes on your ankle. You kind of have that spry ability to jump back, and it may potentially, that little bit of difference could prevent an injury. Now, if you're fatigued, if you're exhausted, if you've been out on the court for 35 minutes, if you've been exhausted in the games up to that point when that's happening, if you've played a bunch of pickup games and it's your 5th day in a row and then that happens, sometimes you get injured sometimes you're more likely to get injured. Now, is that what happened with Julius Randle? Absolutely. I'm absolutely not saying that I know that that's what happened with Julius Randle. That is not my point. All my point is that there are two factors, in my opinion, in load management being preventative to injuries. One is the less you're on the court, the less likely you are to get hurt. That is just, we know that that's true. And two, there could be some factor of fatigue in terms of your ability to tolerate certain types of situations that may result in injury, rather than if you weren't fatigued and did have a little bit of more spry bounce back ability. That's my point with that situation.
See, in neither of those points do I disagree. Like that's the thing. Of course, if you're fresher, you're more aware, you're more alert, you're potentially able to avoid the dirty foot of Bam Adebayo. It is the road management analogy that I'm using. I avoid car accidents by not driving.
Yeah, exactly.
It literally was just to this example. If I am run over by a car, it's not my fault for being on the road.
No, it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
I think that gets conflated. I'm not victim sometimes. Blaming. I know you're not. If I think sometimes load management gets brought up whenever someone gets hurt, and it's like, well, why was he playing so much? Why was he in the game? Like the Brunson injury this year, I think was the most fascinating one, where they were so shorthanded already. And we eventually found out it was basically a cramp. Like what happened? His calf tightened up, and it was like the first 3 seconds of the game where they had 2 days off beforehand. So it was like, how is load management now being factored into this? And obviously a minutes restriction the rest of the year led to what we got from Brunson. So look, I say all of this and I wanted to have that conversation because I think it's essential to how we evaluate the bench. If one of the starters goes down or needs to miss a game, how much do we trust the bench? At least that's going into my research and trying to put my list together. That's how I evaluated other teams. There's a team that's going to come up that has two very injury prone starters. And I actually think they're very built to sustain those two guys going down because of how much I value the two guys that would potentially be their backups. So we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I agree with you that in the concept of load management in theory works. Did you ever read Tom Haberstrow's study? I think he did something that just like how many NBA champions have been impacted by other teams' injury luck. Like how much?
I didn't see that. No.
So I gotta go find it. I forget. I'll send it to you and I'll put it in the link of the description here. But he determined that like the last 25 to 30 champions were decided by some injury luck. And if you go through,
makes sense.
Like it's really the championship Cavs that won. And like Steph did get hurt early in the playoffs, but he was playing shorthand. Like he was playing, which is why you can't fully say like that contributed.
I remember
to the
that
Cavs
playoffs,
winning.
and I never felt like Steph was right, but that's just anecdotally to the eye test. Yeah,
every point guard that he played against was taking advantage of him. Dame was taking advantage of him. Russell Westbrook, Kyrie Irving, they were just targeting Steph.
Yeah, and
he was never the same after that first round injury. But like the following year, Kawhi goes down against Zaza. The following year, Chris Paul goes down in the Western Conference against the Warriors, Western Conference Finals in Game 5. The following year, Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson both get hurt in that finals against the Raptors. You know, like you go throughout, like there was a Giannis injury in the bubble, not the KD injury, but the Kyrie Irving and James Harden injury when he was on Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Like even this year, do I need to go through all of the... We don't need to go through the easy route, the Knicks that got hurt, but the Celtics injuries, the Heat without Jimmy Butler, the Cavs after Mitchell went down. I mean, the Pacers stink, but after Halliburton went down, it made them even easier. And then the West, I guess they did.
The only reason the Pacers
Mavericks
got through with an injured Bucks team, so that's injured part
Bucks
of it too.
Team and injured Knicks team. So like the preventative nature of load management, I agree with you that it ups your chances of preventing injuries, but to how it contributes to a champion, it's why this whole conversation starts with Greg Popovich. He was like, I have 3 older stars. I'm just flatly not going to play them all the time. And when it was so overt, the NBA fined him and he created a term called load management. And they won a title one year because his 3 aging veterans were fresh come playoff time. Look, all this to say, I think the Knicks are built whether they load manage or not. And I think they've also, that's why I think the Marcus Morris thing is so fascinating. Like, they're making sure if like DEFCON 5 hits or whatever the highest DEFCON is with injuries, that we have NBA players in the building that at least to consider whether, I mean, even Marcus Morris is more of a joke, but like, here's campaign with playoff experience. Tyler Kolek, everybody tells me he's NBA ready. And yeah, actually, I'm very fascinated to see where you go with your lists, because if they're top three, I would argue that it's not three. So, so nice. Here's what we'll do. I want you to, we'll start at number 5 and I'll kind of bounce off of what your list is. Who has the 5th best bench in the NBA?
Yeah, the number 5 was tough for me. The top 3 was very easy for me. How you were alluding to one of your spots, I'm like, I don't know if I have the same one, but we'll find out, I think. So number 5 for me was, this might come as a surprise to some people, and I think that's okay, the Golden State Warriors.
My number 5, XJ.
Wow.
There you go.
We did not talk about this ahead of time.
We did not. I'm glad you see what I see. Make the case.
So the Golden State Warriors, I think, are coming into the season with some surprising depth. It's actually incredible. They don't have the highest of high-end talent coming off the bench, which is one thing. There's a couple ways you can look at it. You can look at, who has the most high-end talent, who has guys that can fill in as starters and be high-level starters, or, how deep is their bench? And to me, Golden State's bench is really deep and really good. DeAnthony Melton off the bench, I think, is a huge pickup for them. That works really, really well. Kyle Anderson, low key, he didn't have a good season last year. Another good player that fits into their system pretty well, can defend, can shoot theoretically. Trace Jackson Davis had a really good season, like low key, a very good player. Do you want to jump on that? Because you pointed at me with your pen.
Are you operating that Trace Jackson Davis is coming off the bench and Kuminga is starting?
I was thinking it'd be Kuminga, Draymond starting. What are you thinking?
Well, so I went by ESPN.com's current depth listing. I mean, look, I would start Kuminga over Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, if Kuminga's coming off the bench, it's even better. It's even better. Yeah. So I think when I put like the Warriors down, I wrote Jackson Davis / Kuminga as the option, like that roster spot. Yeah. Either way you look at it, it's very strong, and Trace Jackson Davis is really good. I don't have to talk about Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga is an up and coming star. He's 22 years old. And we've seen glimpses from him already. Like there's not much to say. Obviously they have Kevon Looney. Obviously they have GP2. Obviously they have Moses Moody, who, had made big improvements last year and seems to be coming along really, really well. His shooting's better. Everything he does on the court is better. His defense has been better. And even, deep bench stash, Buddy Hield, man. Mm-hmm. Buddy Hield works for the system that the Golden State Warriors are running. If he's coming off your bench and he's getting open spot up threes, he's going to put it up. He will not be afraid to put it up, and he's going to make 3-point shots. So to me, they really did a great job of building out a deep bench to kind of offset some of the issues that they have potentially with the starting lineup aging. And when we're talking about load management, it's something that we might see with Steph Curry and Draymond Green this year. And I think they can be stabilized by their bench and young guys like Brandon Podziemski, who I'm a big fan of. So you know what Buddy Hield going to the Warriors is? I'm going to use a baseball analogy.
Give me one.
It's like a middling left-handed hitter suddenly becoming a Yankee. And it's like, there's a short porch 314 feet away.
I love that.
And that strength suddenly exists. Like when the Mets originally built Citi Field, the fences were entirely too far away and high, but it was like a building that was built for Jose Reyes. They're like, this is a triples stadium. Like Barry Bonds made us think that ballpark in San Francisco was small because, wow, steroids. But like when they eventually won their titles, it was with line drive hitters that were taking advantage of triples alley. So I use all those examples because sometimes scheme and fit just like matter. And you put one of the best shooters of the last 5 to 10 years on the Warriors and potentially like in the right system where his defensive liability exists, but you surround him with better defenders. I'm with Buddy Hield was actually higher as far as a stash and depth piece. I was like, oh, they have Buddy Hield on this team. They got slow-mo on this team. And if Kuminga's coming off the bench, that makes this bench even more impressive. So I 100% agree with you, XJ.
I can't believe we both had them at 5. That's awesome. I feel really good about that. That's great.
Well, let's continue. Your number 4.
My number 4, I'm not sure if this would be surprising to some people. I think this team has a really good bench. I kind of tiered it. I have the top 3 in one tier, including the Knicks, and then this team I have in another tier underneath that. But I think they're really, really good. The Orlando Magic. I think the Orlando Magic have a really good bench. If you kind of look at the pieces, it's very interesting. So I think one thing is really contingent how high you are on Jonathan Isaac. I'm super high on Jonathan Isaac. I think if he's healthy, he is immediately one of the best bench players in the entire league. Should absolutely be a starter, in my opinion. Is a complete defensive menace. Legitimately one of the best defensive players in the league, including starters, including centers, everyone, in my opinion. He's versatile, long, strong, steals, blocks, on ball, off ball. He's quick. And then you have guys like Mo Wagner, very underrated backup 5, Goga Batadze. Listen, Knicks fans all fell in love with Goga Batadze for like 2 weeks, or maybe it was 10 days, whatever it was, when they wanted him in New York. You can't jump off the bandwagon now. If you thought he was really good when you wanted him to come to New York, he's still really good.
The Goga Batadze era in New York where Hartenstein left and it was like, well, we'll get him. He's a CAA. Oh, he went back to who? Who's this Goga?
Who is that guy? Yeah.
11th man, Goga Batadze. We didn't want him anyway. Precious is better than Goga Batadze. Sims is better than anyway.
Yeah, gosh. Well, I still think Goga Batadze is really good. All of his metrics are off the charts, as we know. Jeremy's talked at length about this, and I agree with that assessment. I think Goga Batadze is really good, whether he was a Knick or whether he's a Magic. You throw in Cole Anthony for a spark. He can be good at times, and Anthony Black going into year 2, defensively is good. He can shoot a little bit. I'll say I think the Magic is really, really good. And I think overall they may be getting underrated right now, especially if they play Jonathan Isaac with the starters instead of Wendell Carter for some minutes. To have a front line of Franz Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, and Paolo Banchero with some shooting and Suggs and KCP, that's tough. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It seems like you went a different direction. I'm curious what you thought.
I agree with you. They're like my number 6. Like they're just. I went with the Warriors just because I like their shooting a little better. I think. I also factored in the NBA.com projection that if Kuminga's coming off the bench, it's just flat out a better bench unit. The Jonathan Isaac piece of it, he's the only one that I would say is like a starter playing on the bench. And that's why if I were like to give it a tiebreaker, that would be that. But I agree with you. In the 24 minutes that Jonathan Isaac is on the floor each night, they're going to be highly impactful minutes, especially when he's closing for Wendell Carter. I have them as like my 6 seed right now, and I think they could fight it out for the 5 seed with the Cavs this year. I have them ahead of Indiana, which I don't think a lot of people do this year.
I have them ahead of Indiana as well.
Well, so the smart people have them ahead of Indiana, but we'll see what happens. This is splitting hairs to your point about tiers, where if they're like my number 6, I valued if you have starters on your bench unit a lot.
That makes sense.
So that's where my number 4 I'll get to in a second. I want to see if you mention them. But your number 3, XJ.
All right, we're going to the top 3. This is my top tier. All right, for Knicks fans, cover your ears. You're not going to want to hear this part. Our sworn enemy, Indiana Pacers.
Ooh.
I can make a really strong argument here, and I think it'd be hard to argue against, in my opinion. So you can have depth on your bench, go really deep. You could have heights on your bench. Like you just mentioned, AC, you might want to have guys who could potentially be starters coming off your bench. I think the Indiana Pacers have both. Now you have 2 guys off your bench who I firmly believe, I am not being hyperbolic, firmly believe should have both been in the 6th man of the year conversation last year. TJ McConnell. We know what TJ McConnell can do when Deuce McBride is struggling to guard you and you're basically embarrassing Deuce McBride from a guard standpoint, a 6'2" guard level. You know, the guy's a monster. And of course,
I was waiting for it. Go ahead.
Our friend, Obadiah Richard Toppin Jr., our friend, all the insane stat facts he produced last year. I think the only player in NBA history with 100 threes made who shot 40% from three and 70% from two. The guy performed at a ridiculous offensive level in limited minutes with limited shots. One of the most efficient seasons we've ever seen in NBA history. His exploits in transition, his pairing with both TJ McConnell and with Tyrese Halliburton. I think he could definitely start for them. And in fact, when he did start, he was part of one of the best 5-man starting lineup rotations with over 300 possessions in the entire NBA. So I think there's some evidence there to support that. And then you round it out with Isaiah Jackson, who is really good. AC, the Knicks would kill to have Isaiah Jackson
right now.
Yes, they would love to have Isaiah Jackson.
We've mentioned a lot of centers so far that the Knicks would kill to have as a backup, maybe even a starter. So,
and then I think to me, it probably comes down to how you feel about the last two guys on their bench: Ben Mathurin, Ben Shepherd. Ben Mathurin had a down year, not a good year, but I think he showed some life. He's going into year 3. I think he will be a decent player coming off your bench, a guy who can score. You might want to have him as your Jordan Clarkson, a guy like that who could come off the bench and put up some points. I think he's going to be good. And Ben Shepherd, I don't think he's great, but I think he's an NBA player. And he played 20 minutes a game in the playoff run that they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, made some huge shots. I think he'll be better next year. He was a rookie. And so to me, that 5-6 man pairing, I think that's a very strong bench and one of the best in the NBA.
So they didn't make my list, but it's more of a technicality. Like they probably have like a top 5 bench or top 3 bench to your evaluation. This was very much XJ's going to mention the Pacers. Like one of the foregone conclusions in life was that Obi Toppin would get mentioned and glowingly talked about. And after the season he had, I think he deserves to be glowingly talked about. So it's good to see that that everybody can be right. The Knicks were able to get Donte DiVincenzo by moving on from him and his roster spot, and Obi found a home where he became one of the most impactful players in the NBA. I don't want to get into an Obi debate because I know that we go back. I'm tiptoeing around the minefield that is talking to XJ about Obi Toppin. He was outstanding last year. It was part of the reason the Knicks got eliminated. The end. That's all I have. That's all.
I'm not talking about him in relation to the Knicks in any way. Just talking about his role with the Pacers and how he performed in that role.
Yeah. Yes. Totally. All right. So I'm just gonna say, okay. I'm actually. Are the Knicks your 2 or your number 1?
The Knicks are my 2. So
okay, so the Knicks are your number 2. I conservatively also have them as number 2, but I actually think in my heart they're my number 1. But let's talk about the Knicks. Why do you have them at number 2?
I'm excited to talk about the Knicks, man.
Let's do it.
The Knicks. The Knicks are so good off the bench. And I think that the best thing is like when you were talking about, guys that could be starters coming off the bench, the Knicks are the obvious case of that. Donte DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride could absolutely be starters. In fact, I don't know if you remember what happened, AC.
Yeah, I wonder what's about to be said. Sorry. These are conversations I am ready to have. Let's do it.
When all 3 were starters next to Jalen Brunson and Isaiah Hartenstein, they were part of the second best starting lineup in the entire NBA with over 300 possessions. They were beating opposing lineups by 33 points per 100 possessions. That is about the same as the Sixers with Maxey, Embiid, Melton, Batum, Harris. And 12 points per 100 possessions better than the next lineup on the list. This is as a starting lineup. This is not a bench squad beating up other bench squads. This is a starting lineup in the NBA through over 300 possessions. It's not a tiny sample size. It's small, but not tiny. Remember our amazing January Knicks? We had Brunson, DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby. Oh, the defensive demon, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, all NBA superstar, Isaiah Hartenstein, completely unstoppable, destroying teams. And they were destroying teams by 17 points per 100 possessions. in a similar number of possessions as this lineup I'm talking about. This lineup with Deuce McBride and Josh Hart instead of OG and Randall was better in a limited sample size, and not just better, they were twice as good. So obviously there's luck factors, all of that stuff. I'm not saying I'd rather have that lineup than OG and Randall. I need to be clear.
The stretch that it happened too. And listen, I don't want to poo-poo that lineup. I was so glad when we finally went to it and what we saw it and how much success it had. A couple of those games, the opponent matters a little bit too. 3 of the games during that stretch were the Pistons, who were awful last year, the Raptors, who the Knicks won by 40, and then the last one was the Brooklyn Nets, who I don't believe will be in Brooklyn in like 5 years. So
yikes.
Yes. But to your point, like the lineup we saw, it was effective. And I was very glad that it meant no more pressures at the, and look, we're talking glowingly about the Knicks 3 bench players. I'm here for it.
I have very good things to say about Precious coming up as well. So it's not just those 3. But my point is, and I'm glad you're here to keep me honest, the opponents matter. AC, you're the historian, you're the memory man, as I say. I'm glad you have a recall of all that. But at the same time, these are NBA teams that they were decimating. Starting caliber players for NBA teams that they were decimating. And I think that matters a lot. And then you alluded to this earlier when we started talking. The Knicks can put NBA players on the floor indefinitely. You know, I think it is hard to weigh rookies into the equation, but Kolek, you get the sense that he may be like a Pajemski kind of guy where he has the feel for the pace and the speed of the NBA that he can kind of hang right away. You know, I'm not a huge campaign fan, but he's clearly an NBA player. He can give you decent minutes. When you can go deep into your bench and have Landry Shamet, literally a proven NBA player. This is not a guy who's like one step away from Europe, in my opinion. This is a real NBA player that is in your deep bench. And then obviously you have Marcus Morris. I think Marcus Morris is pretty done. But again, a guy who's an NBA player can hang with NBA players. We know that for sure. Jericho Sims, I'm not sure about Jericho Sims. If anything, he's regressed a little bit. I'm worried. His training regimen sometimes seems like he's practicing stuff he'll never ever do in a game. So I'm not sure if he's still an NBA caliber guy, but that's kind of like the deepest player on your bench at this point. And with that being said, to me, super high level talent for the Knicks at the front end, super deep at the back end. They have everything you could hope for in a bench. And they could sustain multiple injuries, in my opinion. And I think they're really built to sustain for the regular season. I think this is the second best bench in the entire NBA and could be a contender for the first.
Everything you said, I echo it. They're, again, the way I calculated a lot of my rankings was if I trust you in a starter's role, like if I don't necessarily think, oh, we're screwed when one of our most important players goes down. You know, aside from like a Jalen Brunson injury, like obviously the calculation changes, but yeah, like Randall, I hope he has a great season. I can't wait to see him on the floor. I think there's a really high ceiling with him on the floor this year. And if he goes down again, like, okay, Josh Hart, you're in there. DiVincenzo, you're in there. Like if we lose, like the fact that we saw so much of Brunson next to Deuce last year too, be so successful, and Tibbs going to those smaller lineups that you were championing, I think is going to pay dividends this year as well. So, yeah, I'm right there with you, man. We say all of this, and who do you have ahead of them as far as the best bench in the NBA? I wonder if it's the same that I considered.
Obviously, you know that I love my Oklahoma City Thunder, Andrew.
Same. Yeah.
I just think, what they value, the way they built that team, the thought process over there, just a really smart organization like the New York Knicks. For Oklahoma City, I mean, we have this situation like we talked about with the Warriors. I don't know who you consider coming off their bench. It's Alex Caruso. It could be Isaiah Hartenstein, which would be ridiculous. He'd be the best bench player in the league. Or it could be Dort. I don't think it's going to be Dort. I think Dort's been there for a while. I think he's going to slot in as a starter. He knows how to play off of SGA. I think they're probably going to maintain some continuity there. So to me, it's probably Caruso or Hartenstein. And I will say, as tangentially, if the Knicks had retained Hartenstein and Mitch was coming off the bench, I would have said the Knicks had probably one of the best, if not the best bench in NBA history is what I would have said.
NBA history.
Yeah.
I love that take. Okay.
That's probably what I would have said if that was the case, but I need to think about it more to be sure, but definitely one of them. But to me, okay, going back to OKC, you supplement with either Caruso. Obviously, people know I think he's the best perimeter defender in the league and has been for like 6 years. You supplement that with Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe, 41% from three, 2 years in a row on elite volume, decent defender. You have Cason Wallace coming into a second year, proven as a rookie, put in big situations, performed really well, could guard with the best of them, could hit shots. Aaron Wiggins, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the league, in my opinion. And like, you know, I watch a lot of Thunder basketball. I probably watch them the second most behind the Knicks. Aaron Wiggins, I think he's a sniper. I think he shot like 49% from three. I don't think he's a 50% 3-point shooter, but he's a great shooter. Can play strong defense, can do a very, very poor man's approximation of the SGA impersonation at times with his scoring. Like if you do one of those distortion things where you just like see the player and they don't show you who it is and they're like, who's this player? Wow. You might be like, oh, is that SGA? No, it's Aaron Wiggins. I'm serious. Like you got to watch some Thunder basketball.
They have those guess this batting stance or guess this swing for baseball now. I'm annoyingly good at it, but
I'm sure you are.
that type of thing where you see someone playing, you're like, oh, that's SGA. No. It's his very, very backup. Yes.
It's his very backup, and he's very good. And then Kenrich Williams, another excellent spacer, can hit threes, can rebound, another underrated player. To me, they go super deep. And honestly, if Knicks fans haven't seen much of the Thunder, and they may say, oh, these names, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, Cason Wallace, who are these guys? These guys are all definitely guys who could fill in a starting lineup, and I think you could fill in three of them next to SGA and Chet Holmgren, and I think they wouldn't miss a beat. I think this is the top bench in the NBA. You think you could argue the Knicks above them, but to me they're clearly top three. That the tier is set for me. So that's what I have.
We made the same calculation, by the way, that regardless of if it's Caruso off the bench or Hartenstein off the bench, one of them probably ends up being the best, if not one of the best, in the bench player in the NBA. I actually think that list is really fascinating. It's like, based off our conversation today, it's like Jonathan Isaac is in that conversation. Obviously, either Hart or DiVincenzo would be in that conversation.
Naz Reid is in that conversation.
Well, so the Timberwolves didn't come up on my list because I think there's a drop off after the first two.
Big drop off.
So like between Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid, and like no disrespect to Joe Ingles and who's the guy they just drafted? Where's
Dillingham?
Rob Dillingham. Like, yeah. Outside of that, it's just like a really solid top seven is what I see in Minnesota. Yeah. But yeah, I talk about built to sustain injury, built to answer a ton of questions that throughout the season, built to go up against multiple different looks. I just think that's the tilt that Hartenstein did by going to OKC. And the fact that when he went there, there's no guarantee he starts. Like, wait a minute. So they might have him coming off the bench. He might not close in certain games. You basically lost this series because of rebounding and said, let's spend $87 million on just in case we need rebounding.
That's amazing.
Talk about a luxury. Crazy. Yeah. So I'm right there. I had the Thunder 1 and the Knicks 2, but I also agree, like, there's a world where we're like 2 months into the season and the Knicks are blitzing teams on the second unit with their depth. And it's like, oh yeah, the Knicks have the best bench in the NBA. So, all right. So we go through your top 5 again, and I'll fill in the gaps where I didn't say mine.
All right. And I'm really curious about your list because I had one team that I was like, they're right there, and I could have went with them, and another team that was like, they're probably clearly like 7 to me. So I'm curious where you're going. So I had at 5 the Golden State Warriors, at 4 the Orlando Magic, at 3 the Indiana Pacers, at 2 the New York Knicks, and at number 1 the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Same top 2. I have the Thunder 1, the Knicks 2. We have the same number 5 with the Warriors. Number 3, I put the Milwaukee Bucks after a season which they already had Bobby Portis and didn't have a ton of depth last year. Marshawn Beauchamp and White AJ Green and Pat Connaughton and, guys that I just weren't necessarily looked at depth pieces. Well, you know what they did with the mid-levels that were afforded to them this offseason? They went out and got Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, and DeLon Wright. That's a solid top 8 or 9, if you ask me, if you're a Bucks fan, between your starting 5 being what it is. Now you add like Gary Trent Jr. just is a bucket getter, which is what you want in like the spirit of Norm Powell coming off your bench. And Taurean Prince, Knicks fans, I don't have to tell you if you remember Julius Randle scoring 57 points in a game and them losing anyway because Taurean Prince didn't miss a shot that night. He's just a solid depth piece. And I think the tough part is built to sustain injury. You lose Giannis, you're bleeped anyway. Like there's no real like replacement for Giannis. And you could argue the same thing with Jalen Brunson. So I guess the top heaviness is there. But if Gary Trent Jr. is starting games for them, it's like, oh yeah, it's like a solid NBA veteran that is stepping in. Same thing goes for like if Middleton's down for a little bit, here's Taurean Prince. You know, you can play him at the 3 in certain spots. So I really admire what the Bucks did this offseason in filling out the roster as best they could. And it's why I'm really bullish on the Bucks this season. The take I gave during the over-under pod was that they're closer to the 1 seed than the 4 seed at this point this year. So I went with the Bucks at number 3.
I like that pick. I think that's a good under the radar pick. I think what threw me is that so I figured that Gary Trent Jr. would start for them. Who do you have as their starting lineup? Or who does ESPN have?
Let me look at ESPN, what they have.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking like, okay, Gary Trent would start and then their bench would be Taurean Prince.
They have Prince they have Prince starting. So Gary Trent Jr. comes off the bench in this case.
Okay.
So it is a take everything back that I said about Taurean Prince out of what just happened. Okay.
No, I think it's better for their bench because I like Gary Trent Jr. better as a player than Taurean Prince personally.
And perennial 6th man of the year candidate Bobby Portis that just continues to that offseason the Knicks had when they didn't get Katie and Kyrie continues to be the weirdest thing where it's like solid 6th and 7th men and we're going to sign all of them. And then they're going to, create this glut at power forward for half a season. And then they're going to go to other teams and show how productive they are, whether it be Bobby Portis or several of the other guys that are no longer Knicks. The Bucks in particular were my number 3. And then
I'll just say real quick, my only issue with the Bucks, like I like the pick. Their bench was so bad last year. And obviously they have better players now. Connaughton was a shell of himself. Jay Crowder, shell of himself. Like Gallinari didn't play very much, but their bench was so bad. And Bobby Portis had a down season for him, I think personally. So
for him, yes, but
for him. But I think they could bounce back, and I agree. I like the additions. I like Gary Trent Jr. I like DeLon Wright. I'm a fan of DeLon Wright, so I totally think it's valid.
Hey, you think Bobby Portis had a down season last year?
I think so. I think he had a down season. He shot really well, but I think some of the advanced defensive stuff wasn't looking good, and that's kind of supported by the lineup data. So, and just in terms of lineup data, he played almost 2,000 minutes and was a minus 5.7 differential, 25th percentile in the NBA. That's because he largely played with the bench. But if you look at the Bucks, remember how I always talked about like, wow, the Bucks starting lineup is ridiculously good and dominant over the league. And it's like, how are they not good then? It's because their starting lineup is all plus 13, plus 13, plus 8. And then their bench is minus 4, minus 6, minus 6, minus 7 in terms of on off. So their bench was just really bad. And so I think that biased me a little bit just looking at their last year bench performance. But I think the pieces that they brought in, and I think Bobby Portis, I don't think he's done. He's 28 years old. I think they'll probably be better this year.
28, played 82 games, shot 50-41 last season, 51-41 last season. So that's why I'll call the lineup data a bit of an anomaly, specifically as it pertains to him and the
that's fair.
Lesser NBA players that he was next to on the court last year, which next to Gary Trent, next to DeLon Wright, maybe go to Miami and see if Pat Connaughton can take whatever Duncan Robinson took that one summer. There's a path to it. My number 4 is the New Orleans Pelicans, and it's solely for the reason that I think two of their best players are right now slotted to come off the bench. And that's Herb Jones and Trey Murphy III. The Jose Alvarado is like right up there for one of the best backup point guards in the NBA. They're not like actually super deep. They're not necessarily built to withstand a ton of injury. But if Zion goes down or Brandon Ingram goes down and one of those guys gets inserted into the starting five, I think they get better. So all that to say, this is more of a pick with confidence and how high I am on both of those wings. And the fact that they're going to be part of the bench unit, it's honestly absurd to me. They need to move one of their guys, their forwards. But yeah, that's why I went with the Pelicans at 4. It's very much, I think you have 6 starters and 2 of them are coming off your bench.
I think this is a great argument. I didn't look at ESPN's projected starting lineup. If this is their bench, if their bench includes Herb Jones and Troy Murphy, I would probably have them at 3.
So what starting 5 do you have for them right now?
So I would have them at I would have CJ coming off the bench. So I would have DeJounte, Herb Jones, Ingram, Zion, and probably like Tice. It would be their starting 5. That's what I would imagine.
So they have McCollum at the 2, and then Misi as the starter. But like Daniel Tice or Misi, like it's
whatever. It's
interchangeable. To your point though, they've got Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy III, and Herb Jones as 3 of their bench players right now. And like I'm high on Jordan Hawkins out of UConn. Like the winning pedigree that exists there. I mean, there's not much more to speak of. They have Matt Ryan and like not the quarterback coming off their like as like their 10th or 11th man. So it's not a super deep team. It's just to the point of, again, they have 2 starters coming off the bench, and I think they're like high level starters too. So
those are clearly like very high level stars in the NBA. And if again, based on that criteria, if that's their actual bench, I'd put them at 3 probably.
Okay. There you go. So me putting them at 4 doesn't look as crazy. All right, good. I think to that theme that we're on, the starters coming off the bench, the lineup that we love to go to, and specifically you love to go to, that was so successful in the second half of the year with Deuce and Josh Hart and DiVincenzo. Like, I'm curious how often we see those 3 on the floor with Brunson and a center next year, and you know how many times we'll get to see it. And even if we don't as much, it'll be because we have so many good players that great lineup might not get a chance to see the floor that much. Yeah. But the fact that those 3 on the court together spelled so much success makes me confident in what this Knicks team could potentially be. So your final thoughts on the Knicks bench unit and how it's going to contribute to winning this year.
Yeah, my final thought, I want to kick it off with mentioning somebody I didn't mention. I mentioned the 3. I didn't really talk about Precious Achiuwa that much. I think Precious Achiuwa, people think I hate Precious Achiuwa.
Because you do.
I hate Precious Achiuwa as a 4. I don't want to see him at the 4. I don't want him play. I want him to play 0 minutes this season at the 4. That's I don't want to see that. And unless he's playing next to Karl Anthony Towns or Chet Holmgren, he's not a 4 to me.
Wow.
At the 5,
what went wrong this season, or what went nuclear this season that the Knicks end up with Chet Holmgren? I need to see that universe.
It can't happen. That's my point.
Wake up on Christmas Day, Knicks are trotting out Precious Achiuwa at the 4, Chet Holmgren. Like, what happened?
That would be a weird timeline. That'd be crazy.
You mean we traded for a center from OKC and it wasn't Hartenstein? Wait a minute. I prefer Chet Holmgren personally, but
yeah, I would too. I definitely would too. I Precious at the 5, I think, and DJ posted, some awesome film from a playoff game against the Sixers where Precious was awesome defensively, was able to kind of guard Embiid, showed his versatility, was able to get on the perimeter, switching, making all the right reads, being in the right spot, his rebounding, defending wings, defending huge, the biggest, most powerful center we have in the NBA, and Joel Embiid. Listen, Precious Achiuwa is, in my opinion, genuinely a weapon at the 5. I just say Precious Achiuwa at the 4 is a weapon for the opponent. That's my belief about Precious Achiuwa. And so I think if deployed in that way for 15 minutes per game, I think that's awesome. I think that he'd be a really additive piece to the bench if he can knock down a corner three, at a 33% clip. It makes him even stronger as a weapon. But defensively, he's a beast, and so I want to give credit there too. I think I'm not overlooking him as part of the Knicks' depth. So to me, the team is deep. They're one of the best teams at the high end overall. They have everything you need from the standpoint of skill sets, personality, creators, additive players, defensive stoppers, versatility. They just need to, stay healthy. And I think that the bench is going to help them do that. I do think that guys will be on minutes, not like restrictions or limits, but minutes watches. I think they'll be on minutes watches. I do think that that's something that's going to happen this season. I believe that is a organizational decision, and I think it's going to happen. And so they can stay healthy. They're built to sustain injuries, and I think that's going to lead to their success in the postseason. So I think the bench is going to be a serious part of their success. And to me, they just need to be deployed in a way that maximizes their ceiling. So that means lineups, rotations, minutes, experimentation, timing, all of those things just need to be crisp. And I think if those things happen, the Knicks' floor is an Eastern Conference final. That's their floor, not their ceiling, a floor. So their ceiling is beating the Oklahoma City Thunder for the NBA title. That's their ceiling. But, we'll see. I think the bench is going to be an integral part of that. And I'm very happy that they have what I think is clearly the second best, or at least in a tier of the top 3 best benches in the league. And, I think that's going to help them get really far. I hope they don't consolidate it, honestly. I'll just say that.
I wonder if consolidation trades are done. I know there's the center market that exists, but I don't think they're gonna. I mean, listen, they surprised me by trading for Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, so I'm not gonna rule anything out. But I mean, we'll see what happens. So a couple things. First of all, one of the most forgotten big wins of the season was a Friday night against the Orlando Magic, where backup center Precious Achiuwa was really good in said game. Played a bunch of minutes. I'm staring at the box score now. Precious played. Not backup center. Starting power forward. Precious Achiuwa played that game, but had 5 blocks, had 15 and 14. And while the model of him at the 4, we saw it work for a little bit due to offensive rebounding, and then teams just decided not to guard the perimeter anymore. And that's why I think that model failed eventually. But that huge win where they won by 24 and allowed 74 points to the Orlando Magic,
guarded Paolo Banchero
throughout the night,
well.
And his ability to switch that night between guarding Isaac or guarding Wendell Carter or guarding, like you said, the smaller forwards, whether it be Franz or Paolo throughout the night, it's a weapon. And him switching off with Randall on the court will obviously be necessary. Him switching with Anunoby to the clip that DJ posted, it was actually like it helped them win a playoff game. So I'm right there with you with what Precious Achiuwa as a 5, even I'm right there with you. Like as a 5 can be how much of a weapon it could be. And if he plays minutes at the 4 this season, something went very wrong. Or
I would say so. We got a lot of guys you could play for.
Mikal, Randall, Anunoby, Josh Hart, like. I'm at Marcus Morris before we go to Precious at the 4 at this point. And look, to your point about their floor and what it could be, look, there may be a world where the minutes that the gets saved by the starter, like the Warriors' death lineup of old, the Warriors were so deep in 2015 and 16 and had so many ways that they could beat you that Steph would start the 4th quarter on the bench, and then they would just turn a 10-point lead into a 20-point lead, never come back in. Yeah. So there may be a lot of games where the Knicks are up by 25-30, and I mean, because it's Tibbs, there will be a guy get put back in the game, and we're wondering why, and that will just be what happened. We'll just sweat those minutes out. But there will be a lot of games where, like, Anunoby only had to play 30 tonight because the Knicks were up by 30. And that part of that weapon and part of the way they get there is because of what their bench is. And I'm excited to see what the ceiling is. You said their floor, if deployed correctly, is a conference final, and their ceiling is them against the Thunder and winning in the finals. both Jeff Passan and Adam Schefter in their audition to be the new NBA insider for ESPN predicted a Thunder Knicks finals this week. Do you have a prediction before we get out of here? Not maybe. I won't hold you to a finals prediction, but how about just this? Over under 53.5 for the Knicks this year. 53.5 wins.
I mean, I'll definitely say over 53.5 for sure. And I will say, as a finals prediction, Oklahoma City Thunder and New York Knicks. I genuinely believe that. That again, I'm speaking out of not both sides of my mouth here, but I think it's how they're deployed. Wink, wink. The coaching staff has a job to do this season. So
which they've done good lately. So I'm I'm confident in them deploying them correctly.
They've done well. But I think they have all the tools. I think they have all the pieces, and I think they're totally fine. If they never get another center, I think they're okay. Unless, God forbid, an injury. But otherwise, I think they're okay.
That's the one thing we didn't really talk about is the center depth isn't potentially there. And that, I think, is where not necessarily a consolidation trade will come into play, but if they lose Mitch for an extended period, and I mean, between Precious and Sims, I'm not fully convinced that's a championship or a deep playoff run. Which is where, they do have some assets left to potentially go get a center. But as is, I'm right there with you that this is a team that can contend for at least a conference title, if not an NBA title, as currently constructed. XJ, this was a fun conversation. I always love talking ball with you. And before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and anything you'd like to plug.
Super fun conversation. Always happy to jump on and chop it up. GMAC at Xavier J Designs. You can see, you can catch me on Twitter. I do a podcast with my buddy Jeff called Hot Hand Theory. We talk about the Knicks, but it's an NBA wide podcast. We talk about all kinds of teams, all kinds of concepts, all kinds of data and metrics, really boring, monotonous stuff, but really fun stuff if you're a basketball junkie. So find us there.
Hell yeah. Shout out to your mom again, and because it's her birthday. That
sounds so bad to be like, shout out to your mom,
yeah,
bro.
Your mom's. Yeah. Your mama's birthday is so today. No, I'm kidding. Happy birthday, Mrs. XJ's mom. And,
appreciate it.
Congratulations to you and Mrs. XJ on your nuptials. And everybody in the comments, flood with that sentiment. Say happy birthday to XJ's mom and congratulations to XJ on tying the knot. That'll do it for us. If you dig the show, head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, you know what to do, spread the word, get everything out. I'll be back next week with one more top 5 before media day, before we get into the full season preview and the team actually comes back. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and I will speak with you soon.